Whew, I feel like I have a lot to apologize for this one. You can tell the exact moment where this project broke me. It just went on for far longer than I expected. The video quality, for whatever reason, also fell apart. I touched one setting on the camera and it just went. That was the end of that. There's going to be some wildly inconsistent editing in here just to try to keep it down. I go through brakes, wheels and tires, a little bit of steering. Do you ever wake up in the morning and find yourself just yearning to watch someone align sheet metal on a truck? Look no further. Let's get started.
The process of relining sheet metal is more art than science. I had to take loose all the hardware on both sides of the fender and the core support to be able to shift the core support back to the aligning hole, and then go ahead and reinstall all the sheet metal on the driver's side, which then caused me to do most of the same process on the passenger side.
The sheet metal up front's aligned. It looks much better than it used to. Now it's on to reassembling all the wiring and the engine compartment.
The ECU reinstalls using its factory bracket. The relay box you see me installing now is specific for running the ECU and the fuel pump. The passenger side relay box runs the 2-speed electric fan, which is one of the mythical Ford Taurus fans. Now I'm on to reassembling a ground wire which I cut in order to remove the fenders.
So underneath the truck, I've taken a measurement, my favorite tool, the coat hanger. So now I know the exact length and bends that I need to turn this 3/8 tube into the last fitting I need to hook the transmission back up so we can fire it up with no exhaust system. Does it still crack to life? Prime the fuel pump. Let's be smart about this. Check for fuel leaks. None. And none. No. I f***ed something up. These are probably handy. Is that what I forgot? Because it didn't crank over, and those are on different systems. From the mountaintops of glory to the valleys of defeat, this one did not fail. After about 20 minutes of diagnosing whilst wearing different clothes, jumping in the truck from the passenger side, staring at the steering wheel, realizing the neutral safety switch had gone bad. We're ready to keep going. I'm using an ICT billet conversion kit to relocate the new Saginaw unit. Continue to use the alternator in its current position, which is wired into the harness, which I've mentioned before, which also has an ICT billet unit. They do absolutely phenomenal machining. It's all metric. That's all SAE. So to convert this hardware to Freedom units, it's 3/8 bolts. Everything else in the kit just kind of use as is. The ITC units installed under a little bit of protest, but with all the hardware loose and slowly tighten them all in kind of concentrically, it does eventually go on. The power steering pump from the newer unit off of the 2006 Express van, which this mill came out of, doesn't fit, so I need to make it another trip to the parts store. Let's talk about shafts for a moment. This beauty showed up from Speedway Motors yesterday. 2 inches in diameter as opposed to 2 1/4 inches in diameter. The overall length from top to tip of the shaft is identical to what we're going to pull out of the truck. Shift arm is in a different spot. Existing Ford unit, it's a couple inches further up. There. That is the exact moment where the project broke me. Bear with me. I know it got dry. It's worth it in the end. It really is. These days, I may as well put a ratchet shifter in the floor. Wiring harness is not exactly going to fit. I have the wiring pin out for this, wiring harness diagram for the truck, and I'll just use the same connector, snap it all together. That'll be taken care of. Shift linkage arm. New unit from Speedway Motors comes with two different lengths. We need to make sure we get one that's the same length, either by modifying this one or the other one to match what's on the truck currently, because you have rotation up at the column, and then you have the same rotation down at the transmission. These are different lengths. You're not going to hit gears correctly. I can already tell what's on the Ford column is going to be a good 2 inches longer than what's on the Chevy column. Down here, one of the bearings that it's puked out. Couple bolts under the brake booster that I'll go and take loose so we can get everything out from down here. I've taken all the necessary measurements from the existing steering column. The important one is placement of this bottom 1-inch double D shaft, which needs to be 7 inches from the firewall. So I already have a piece of tape on here. Once I pull the other steering column out, I'm just going to mock this in place. I've already mocked the wheel on. It ends up being a 1/4 inch further in than the existing. Steering wheel is just about ready to come out. This is a 15/16 nut. Since we're all coming apart, you need to remember to push down, at minimum 1/2 inch wrench just to get a lot of torque behind it. What I pulled off from the engine bay, this is the cover that goes up against the firewall, and then there's this retainer which luckily has carriage bolt on one side, because you cannot take the steering column out with the steering wheel in place. It's just too big. It'll hit your back window. Ask me how I know. There are no dramatic differences between the columns. Wires come out at about the same spot. You need to go back to wiring diagram to noodle all that out. Both neutral, safety switch, and reverse lights. Taking a quick measurement. The steering linkage arm is 1.5 inches longer on the old Ford unit. In all honesty, is fine. I made an extension on the transmission linkage, so if I go back to the original hole in the transmission and that linkage arm, it'll be fine. I need to move this to here. And then this support bracket, I've taken some adhesive back foam rubber, put it around the bottom. This takes up the slack between the old boot. Cross-drilled the steering column for the safety set screw that goes through the U-joint. Changed out the GM style connector block for what was the old style Ford hookups, and again, these have the replacement Mullix connectors I put on there. This is a chart that I put together. Just let me try that again. That is your chart. Now, this does not work for the I Did It steering columns because they are different, even though I'm pretty sure they come off the same assembly line.
This is the bracket I've transferred from the old steering column to the new.
Next thing I need to do is something about the neutral safety switch. These first two wires are neutral safety, second two reverse lights, so you don't even need to open the entire harness. Let's get right in. Looking at the harness, reverse lights are red with blue stripe, so these two will get capped individually. And then these two black with red, those are neutral safety switch. They're also down here, they come first in line. We're just going to solder them together and loop them so it's always hot. Heat shrink tube, and then what I like to do is twist them, make sure they're all nice intertwined, and on their own they're not going to separate. Just in case your solder job is not fantastic, everything still functions. So we've had the soldering iron heating up for a little bit. Old wire, you can tell it's losing conductivity. It's not sucking the solder around like it should. Let that cool off for a second. If we slide the heat shrink tube over too quickly, it'll shrink as it's going past it. So I'm just going to take the reverse lights, fold them over, throw a piece of heat shrink tube over it. You want to make sure when you put your heat shrink tube on that it has the right shrink ratio for your wire size and also clears your solder joint. So you're more or less watertight going around your edges. Apparently I need to spend another couple minutes looking at the neutral safety switch wiring. What I said to do didn't work. The reverse lights were on full time and neutral safety switch is just disconnected, so truck won't kick over. So we'll hit that in a moment. However, what we can do is test all the lights. Driver's blinker works out back, works out front, of course flashing on the dash. Left, there's something goofy with that LED, but flashing in the front. Now, I don't have any fluid in the master, so just a slight touch Brake lights still come on. This is about as good a view as I'm going to give you. Before we throw all the stuff that's back here for steering wheel on, I want to make sure the horn works to verify all the wiring is correct. We know this is the horn button. Steering column is grounded. If we quickly touch the horn button and the column, horn works. Spring goes on here. Copper piece going around is the horn contact, which always sits on here. That's how you don't have wires coming around and wrapping. Actually, we're going to pause for a second because before I set this up, I want to make sure the wheels are facing straight. So bear with me. Now that that's handled, wheels are straightish. Spring, this comes with the kit. That goes on. That goes here. Spacer goes on, and then allegedly this was supposed to have up marked. We're gonna assume by our steering wheel, which has an extra hole for the horn button, this is gonna go here. So that opening wants to point. So this is gonna go. That goes there. That's still. I may need to shorten that tower a little bit. Okay, so that works. What that now tells me, if we whack 1/8 of an inch off the top of this tower and get the wire to go through the channel, and yes, it will be resting against the inside of this cup, which covers the top. However, it will be, this is powder coated, so it's not going to ground out. Let's do that. I'm still going to clamp them on the first try because I haven't given up yet. So I trimmed about 1/8 of an inch off that tower, cleaned it up, so we're not going to cut the wire. Voila, my splines. Pop this back on. Yeah, that's acceptably straight. Our wire back in. Wire goes through. Using all 6 of your hands, take the steering wheel, put that through this hole. Retaining nut needs to go on. Remember, it's spring loaded under there, so if we don't get safety nut or anything on there, it'll just plunk off. Of all things, it'll bug me if the steering wheel's off by 1 spline. Next, we have our PCB with interface and whatnot on there. Yeah, this gets screwed down first. Microscopic shoulder bolts. Gonna take our horn wire, put it through here. I have put, still works. Okay, so the way this all works is the world's tightest connection here goes onto this connection on the PCB. There's a spring here that goes on this, and once we snap these together, spring pushes against the inside of here, which is a horn button, and keeps it from constantly contacting. Right? Yes. Right. Yes. Yes. So that allows the horn button to slide up and down on these shoulder bolts. So I'll make this quick for you. We're just gonna run this nut down to make sure we're seated. That may have been a metric nut. Okay, back to reality. Detent, 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 location, location, location. We're going to roughly align those. Spring. Alright, that works. Oh, the detent's facing straight up. That's the stuff that'll drive me nuts. And one more hello to the neighbors. We're just gonna let this one slide. My newest assumption with this, when it's in full park, there's always a connection going across here. Black with red set of wires. You see that little thing in there? those are reverse lights. The red with the blue wires, those are the neutral safety switch, which are in neutral, not park. You would think it would be the same. So we're just going to reverse this pigtail. We are actually starting to get towards the end of this project. We have brake lines to do, a couple brackets, wheels and tires. That's it. We're done. For brake lines, initially for $25 bought this spool, but either bending it out by hand or using those stupid plastic roller things. I know. It's still not straight. It looks like it came out of Willy Wonka. So we're not going to use that. It's good noise. I went to local Napa and picked up a bunch of these pre-terminated pieces. So they have both ends on them already, which I'll cut down, couple together, and whatnot as needed. But it's a lot easier starting for something like this, which is a couple bucks a piece. This was, I think, $7 for a 60-inch length. And we'll just bend it, lock it in, do all that. I need to make 3 brackets for brake lines. I started mucking in the proportioning valve so I can finish measuring for forward brake lines. In my case, I just made a simple 90-degree bend and terminated it on each end. Bend number 2, which comes from here, which is the front valve, and it's bent a piece of coat hanger and cut to length using the same pipe bender that I have to bend the brake line. First off, this Tool Guy Republic brake flaring kit is the best thing I bought in a long time by far. It makes it easy, repeatable. So to translate this piece of coat hanger to here, we're going to measure, unfold it all, cut it with the miniature pipe cutting tool, and then deburr the opening, the countersink bit. Go back, flare the first joint, and then we'll make sure to take our fitting, stick it on there. Tube bending tool, we'll put it right up against here. So it'll sit on the outside, that'll be the end of the bend, and that's how we'll start everything. What I do is I degrease the tube, make sure it's straight enough, because the dies will straighten out the rest of the way. Put it in with a little pigtail sticking out. There's a shelf in here for the bottom die to sit against. Move the built-in vise over, rotate it to operation 0, which all it does is it makes sure your tube is push flush with the top of here, and your dies are flush and everything's set correctly. At that point, tighten everything down. We're using 3/16 tube, so we switch to 3/16 operation 1. Push it till it stops moving. You have your flare started and your bubble also begun. And you go to 3/16 operation 2. Done. Now what we have is this beautiful double flare that, as long as we remember to put the fitting on before we bend the tube, matches perfect. Put a little bit of pressure in there, or the tube straight up against the fitting there, or the housing, and bend it to the first 90. In the rear, we have our soft lines hooked up to our brake calipers. This bracket just loosely zip tied in place because I don't want to cut that off. I know the line's going to stop right about at the flange here, so we'll end up making a bracket. So I have this 20-inch line from Napa, bend it forward at a 45-degree angle, and then we'll round it down and then use the bender to bring it level. And then once I get it roughly in place, I'll build the bracket last, because the last thing you want to do is have your nice new brake lines, the hard lines especially, under tension. Yesterday I plumbed the entire brake system in about 2 hours, which is great. That Tool Guy Republic brake flaring tool is the greatest thing I've ever purchased. I do recommend buying one. What we're going to do next is take the master cylinder off, bleed it, put it back on, pressure bleed the system. I did, using a garden sprayer, make my own version of the Motive pressure bleeding system. And then it's setting up the rear brakes per the instructions. I'm hoping with the pressure bleeder I don't have to take the calipers off to hold them in weird positions, get the last bit of air out, set the parking brake, go from there.
The master cylinder ships with a pretty low-end bench bleeding kit, which I honestly do not trust to legit hold air. What I do have is a thread-in plastic kit that I bought years ago that I've used on many cars, which works money.
I use some small clamps to hold it up top. Fill with our favorite Doc 3 brake fluid. You want to make sure your hoses are going into the fluid, not necessarily towards the bottom, just under. Implement of pressure. I want to use something with kind of a round end to press against the piston on the inside here, and you're just going to cycle it and wait for these tubes to fill up with fluid and wait for bubbles to stop coming out of the end. All right, so all the bubbles have cleared out. I'm sure you've seen almost none of that. With the master cylinder reinstalled, just keep in mind that brake fluid is very corrosive. Protect your paint. I've taken a bunch of paper towels and shoved them down here, taking these out one at a time. Try not to, again, destroy my very mild paint job. We're going to grab pressure bleeding kit. Using both my eyes and ears, this wasn't holding pressure, and I could hear it raining, and I found one line going to the portioning valve that was not tightened down. It's holding currently at about 5 psi. We're going to pump it up to 15. We're going to start with the furthest brake line, and then we'll work our way around to the closest. It took about 5 minutes to go through the entire system. Did in fact have to follow what the manufacturer for the rear calipers said. Doesn't get all the air out of them. You had to take the calipers off after you bled it, rotated them vertically, cracked the bleeder, and you could see air come out of there. That fixed most of what was going on. Still had like a 3-pump pedal. The rest was done through adjusting the parking brake, mainly through the adjuster U under the truck. We're at the point where you can start speccing wheels. I know what tires I want. I know I want a 27-inch diameter tire, which will be 2 inches smaller than the current 29.3-inch tires that are on the truck. 2 to 3 inches between the front of the fender and the tire. So that's the clearance width. The Crown Vic mounted in. The pinholes not mounted from the spring pocket to spring pocket between the Crown Victoria and the original F100 suspension. What you're watching me do now is go through the process of creating a full-size cardboard mock-up of the wheel and tire setup that I want to use on the truck. I'm making this so it's, call it expandable, so I can adjust the offset in and out as I need so I can find the right set of wheels that I want. Knowing the tire size is likely going to be, at least up front, a 235/50/17. Survey says you cannot run the Ford Taurus SUV Police Interceptor wheels. With the 38mm offset of the Crown Victoria Police Interceptor wheels, 235/55/17, it touches the Russell's brake line that I have in there, so I have to switch back to the Crown Victoria brake lines. I was a little concerned they were going to be too short. Look at that. We have sheet metal. Just about done. Wheels and tires. You would be astounded how difficult it is to find a wheel that fits the Crown Vic front end on this. There are some aftermarket aluminum machined ones. They're not to my taste. So I got 4 of these Pacer 17/7-inch wheels. As far as I can tell, Pacer doesn't actually exist. It doesn't have a website. They make direct rip-offs, or they do the OEM manufacturing for Krager wheels. They're like $100 a rim, and they fit. We'll find out shortly. Tires are a General Max ASO 7, so same wheels and tires all the way around. In the future, I'll look at getting something a little bit more meaty because I'm pretty sure I'm going to roast the crap out of these. Merchandise! You can never have enough merchandise! I am going to start selling Leak and Oil Garage branded merch. Stay tuned. That'll be coming somewhat soon. So here's the finished product of the truck. The stance is just about perfect. The front end is right where I want it to be. The back end's up a little bit high, but it is a pickup truck that I intend to use as a pickup truck, so it being up a bit higher, not a bad thing. It can still hold weight.
What I screwed up when speccing the wheels was in the rear, I went from wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface, which is 60 inches. In the front, I got tripped up on, I kept reading 65 inches, and I thought this was wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface, but it was actually wheel base. Wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface is closer to 67 inches.
From a maintenance perspective, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. I can still get under the truck, change the oil easy enough. Working in the engine bay is fantastic. Just need to bend over a little bit. There's no more teeter-tottering myself on the fender. Those days are done. The one oddity I'm dealing with is when I went through and reinstalled the sheet metal and shimmed everything so the cowl lines up, the door jams, and everything lines up. Everything's going to be a touch off because the roof was replaced a number of years ago. The passenger side has about 5/8 of an inch worth of shims, and as you can see here, the truck looks like it's sitting like that. But in all actuality, that's just the sheet metal sitting like that. And I went through and adjusted the Viking coilovers to even it out. And then I took the measurements from under the truck and realized I actually need to drop the driver's side a 1/2 inch so it sits correctly chassis to ground, which I'll do in the garage on a semi-level surface, not trusting the bottom of the driveway. Would I do something like this again? Yes, of course I would. I really enjoy it. It is frustrating to some extent, but this is the stuff that I really enjoy doing. Making stuff, building stuff, machining stuff, sticking stuff together. All of the stuffs. So keep up with us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm sure there will be many more social medias to come. Let's get cracking. We got a lot of stuff to do.